Welcome to The Foundry, where leaders are forged daily. And now your host, George Roberts.
Welcome back, entrepreneurs. Today we have Craig Stevens, founder of groundbreaking real estate and short-term rentals. Welcome to the show, Craig.
Thank you. Thank you for having me, George.
Well, Craig, I'd like to start in the traditional fashion. I want to ask, so sort of how did you get into real estate? You had some great jobs in corporate world, and how did you merge from the corporate world to real estate?
Yeah, I was a senior finance leader in corporate America. I spent 25 years working in various finance roles. I was at times traveling a lot and working a ton of hours. And at one point, I just decided that this cannot be the end of where I'm gonna be, at 65, 70 years old, just working my day job, full time throughout my career. And I was looking for a way, an outlet that I could use to have a side hustle while I was working, and also find a way to potentially leave my organization for my own business someday. So real estate became that way, path forward, right? So I ended up just laying out a plan, and every single year I would look for properties. I started in the New York City, Westchester area, just north of New York, and just buying up small multifamily properties, 3-4 family buildings, 1-2 a year, adding them kind of slowly, and eventually started investing in Indiana as well, Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I bought a 9-unit building there, a couple of duplexes there. So at the end stage, I had 9 properties, 35 tenants, was making decent income from those transactions. And I decided eventually I had a path forward and quit my job this year to focus full-time on real estate.
Awesome. And I think maybe we'll go into your markets next. So how did you pick Indiana?
I was actually, while I was working in corporate America, I was the CFO for a US life and health insurance company. One of my offices was in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And I had an employee that also was in real estate investing down there. And he was telling me more about the markets. I was interested in diversifying out of New York. And he kind of toured me around on evenings, and we would go look at properties. And that's when I started seeing some good opportunity down there. So I selected that market because of the nice, stable income cash flow there. Not a lot of strong upward, valuation increases, but it ended up being a great market for, much lower entrance price. You can get a pretty large building.
Yeah, very exciting. I hear a lot of people talking about Indiana. So great choice there. And sick and tired of people just telling me about the Sun Belt.
Exactly.
I'm done with that. I want to hear something new. So you do mention being a senior leader for many years in finance. I'd love to ask about the lessons you learned and how that transferred over to real estate.
Well, being in finance, I was a CPA. I'm spending a lot of time working through numbers, preparing financial statements. So I think that first made me very savvy from a finance perspective, being able to vet deals a bit more quickly. I love modeling, love looking at the numbers. So I dig in easily into those things. So that really helped to drive that spirit. But also the leadership experiences that I got in corporate America, leading very large teams. At one point, I had almost 300 people reporting to me. It gives you a chance to be able to take a step back and not get stuck in the details at the same time. Understanding how to lead an entire group of individuals and know that you don't need to do everything yourself. So it's about identifying people to help you with different activities rather than doing them yourself, and becoming more of someone that can help to manage those individuals across, multi-characteristics of personalities, multi-communication aspects. And it gave me the ability as well to communicate more strongly, I believe, with individuals and my investors now that I work with on the capital raising side.
Yeah, in fact, if you hadn't mentioned it, that would be what I would have brought up next, is the capital raising. The capital raising, wow. I mean, you started with a network of, say, about 2,500 on LinkedIn. And were immediately very successful. Obviously, you were plugged into a hugely successful network. So you're in corporate America, you're a leader, you have a multi-six-figure salary, and the people around you are the sort of people who have the wherewithal to go into this. What might be some of your suggestions to people that are trying to get into capital raising?
So I kind of fell into capital raising. I thought at one point I wanted to do my own syndications. But as I started to think about leaving corporate America, I decided that my super strength was actually in my network and maybe not so much in managing a whole transaction from end to end. So my suggestion would be for individuals to start early on in their capital raising. Even if you don't have a transaction right now, if you've never bought one, real estate investment, just start networking with individuals, create your story about what you're planning to do and share that with people so that they can see your path to success. In corporate America, I think I was very good always about just meeting new people, connecting with them, following up with them, trying to meet with them live, at any opportunity I had. That network of individuals that you meet now today will have endless value using other people's money with your investments in the future. You're always going to have a need for other people's money at some point in the future if you're going to grow your real estate business. So start early, go to networking events, be out there and share your story. Don't be shy about talking about your plans to invest. What are you investing in? That would be, my biggest recommendation is start now. I probably started tapping into that group a little too late, but at least I had built up that network early on. Exactly.
So for you, it's really more a matter of your professional network as opposed to having gone out and I don't know, I'm asking, but yeah, like a thought leadership program, a local meetup, or any of these other things that you're running. Basically, you're just tapping into other people's events and venues, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. At this stage, right? I do have plans to go beyond my current network and try to start, garnering some organic leads, right, for investors by doing more LinkedIn posts. So, another piece of advice is start posting on LinkedIn. Regardless of where you're at on your real estate venture, you don't even have to post about real estate at this point, but just get yourself out there in social media. I'm starting to get leads from those posts that I do, and not all of them are on real estate right now. So I'm starting to get organic leads just through that process. But I am planning to kind of build out a further strategy to grow my lead, my investor leads.
Yeah, outstanding. And I can say, as somebody who has had a podcast, and this will be somewhere around episode 97, it'll definitely be close to 100. I'm telling you, after doing about 100 of these, it's much easier to go on other people's podcasts. So nothing wrong with that. I do run my own events. I mean, I kind of took the opposite approach. I was in IT for a while, so I do have some high net worth connections. But really, my success has come from going out into the real estate space and focusing on being a thought leader and building my connections there. But great story, great story.
I love
any particular advice
George.
to people?
You and I met at a real estate conference, right, in Texas, and you were out there meeting everyone up until very late nights, right? And we met. I thought very highly of you, and you get yourself out there. I love what you're doing with the podcast, and so congratulations.
Well, likewise,
on everything that you're doing.
Yeah, that's the real me. I mean, if you see me at a networking event, I'll probably close the place down. Any advice to people that may not have such an amazing network like you do, and that you built through having such an amazing professional career?
There's ways to tap into other folks' networks as well, right? So being on podcasts like this is a way to tap into other people's networks. But don't think that just because you don't have a network built up right now that you can't get there. I didn't have 2,500 contacts on LinkedIn initially. It starts somewhere. So you just start to build up that network and stay active. The people that you meet, make sure that you're connecting with them on a real perspective, right? Don't just reach out to them and ask them for something. Make sure that you're building some type of strong connection with them. You don't need 2,000 people. You need 50 people that believe in your story and that are interested in working with you. I'd say my core network of investors right now is probably 80 people. And I tap into those 80 folks primarily, and then I'll get a few coming out of the other, other group of folks that I don't connect with as often.
Yeah, outstanding. Now, from your entire corporate career, if you could just distill it down to one greatest lesson you've learned, what would that be?
To be diligent about anything that you're going after. If you decide that you have a plan in place and you know how you want to achieve that plan, go after it with huge determination and don't give up until there's something that pushes you back and you decide that it's insurmountable at some point. But there's going to be barriers to every single strategy that's complicated. And you just need to keep going with some strong drive and eagerness, and believe in your plan, no matter what others say as well, and just keep going, pushing forward.
Awesome. Would a fund be a possible next step for you?
We've been looking into starting a fund as well. It's kind of a nice way to be able to build up the capital first and then identify the transactions. So I do think that there's opportunities there to have kind of a fund of funds where we would invest in other syndications, and have this kind of layer of a fund on top. I think the challenge right now in this environment is that the deal flow is a little bit slower, good deals, because of the high interest rate environment, because of the competitiveness of chasing after good deals. So my concern of creating a fund at this stage is, will you really find enough deals to fill that fund, within a reasonable amount of time?
Great. And I wasn't sure if we were going to talk about this sooner or later, but the world is changing as we record this at the very end of November. Interest rates have shot up like crazy. They pulled back recently, maybe the last couple of weeks. We don't know where they're going from here, although we all believe it's most likely up, at least in the short term. So what have you been doing in this higher rate environment to remain successful?
It's looking at the transactions, making sure that they stand on solid ground from a financing perspective, that you don't end up in a deal that has some type of floating rate without proper cap coverage, right? Interest rate caps. And also scrutinizing deals a little bit more closely. I think long gone are the days when we're going to be seeing 25, 30% returns right now in this environment, the average annual returns. I think we have to set expectations for investors that a more reasonable return could be between 13 and 17%, and trying to be a little bit more careful about loan to values as well. So I don't like to see deals that have something above like a 80% loan to value. I think that just puts the investors at risk if there's kind of a significant downturn in the markets. So it's being more diligent, reviewing the transactions more closely than ever before, running scenarios on the transaction, make sure they stand up in different interest rate scenarios. That's kind of the core, I think.
Right. So it sounds like rather than going towards different approaches, what you're doing is really more a matter of underwriting more conservatively and making sure that the finance end, particularly on the debt, is set up appropriately. Things like interest rate caps. Yeah.
That's right.
Great thing to learn about if you don't know yet.
Yes.
Out there in the audience.
And don't chase bad deals right now, right? Just make sure that don't chase a deal just to get a deal, right? You just, there could be 6 months where you just don't invest right now. Get cash on the sidelines, because there will be opportunities coming. And there's also, there will be refinancing opportunities in the future. Rates will go down, right? So even if you get stuck at an 8% rate right now, hopefully in a couple of years' time, 3 years down the road, if you have a good transaction, you should be able to refinance to a lower rate, hopefully.
Great. And I wonder if you'd like to go into more depth on that. I mean, one of the things I spent a lot of time on, I just rebranded as the data scientist of real estate. I spent a lot of time looking at macroeconomics, housing economics, and trying to figure out where things are going and why they're going in that direction. Do you want to go a little deeper as to what's going on in the macroeconomic scene and where you see housing prices going and what sort of opportunities you think are going to open up?
So right now, because the interest rate increases, there are fewer people that are going out and buying their home, their dream home or their first home. They're going to need to move into some other location. They still need a house, a roof over their head. So there's going to be a higher influx into apartment complexes. So I think that, residential is going to still be a good place to be. And there's also a situation where when the housing prices are going down, you're going to be pressured to be able to find more properties, right, residential properties, to be able to fill that demand. There's not a lot of as much building going on, new construction going on as probably is needed in order to fill that. So even some of your older buildings will have a higher demand, is what I would see. Now you have to be a little careful around cap rates, right? Going in cap rates and exit expectations around exit cap rates, because there could be even impacts on what investors are willing to pay for an apartment complex in the near future. So I think you have to be careful about weighing, your debt financing on your residential property comparative with your expected cap rates on the deal.
Yeah, well, a lot in that response. We have far fewer homes on the market now than we did during the last housing cycle. And by the way, I'm going to make a recommendation here. Lawrence Yun, he is the chief economist for the National Association of Realtors. If you want to follow him, I would highly recommend that. He had a great graphic, very similar to the graphic that I've been showing in my presentations about 2008 versus the present. And I think that was another very valuable thing that he has in his most recent post, which is again showing that people are just not selling right now. Why? Well, interest rates are going up, and you want a similar sized home. You may have to pay a whole lot more per month for that. It's really hard. The people who are selling now are the ones that have to. Yeah, a lot of differences between this and the last housing cycle. But I do appreciate your insights and being willing to kind of go out there on a limb and make some predictions about what might happen and what has been happening to give us the commentary on that, because I think that's something that's really missing. I think there are far too many people who are out there going blind right now. If you don't have that macroeconomics perspective, then I don't really know how you're going to keep yourself safe. I wouldn't feel safe out there if I wasn't spending a fair amount of time on macroeconomics.
I agree. Absolutely.
All right. Well, I guess with that, we'll leave the dismal science and go into something a little more exciting. So I think we talked a lot about groundbreaking real estate. So that's what you've been using as a vehicle for acquisition and for capital raising. But I also want to draw out the entrepreneurial aspect of today's show. And let's use short-term rentals as the vehicle for that. So you have a short-term rental company, and as I understand, what you're doing is essentially you're serving as the host, correct?
Yeah, correct. We're listing the properties and managing the properties for the owners. So what we've created a website where guests can go search for properties and transact through our website. We can also link up with Airbnb and VRBO, and then we're also managing the properties for those owners during their guest stays. I started in New Jersey, even though I live in North Carolina now, because I had a beach home there. And I realized that there was a pretty significant need for good property management. So that's, I think, our key to success is the website, being very integrated and not needing to have a lot of hands-on touch to those guests. You can do it a lot in an automated fashion. And then also being able to provide strong property management services so the owner can kind of sleep well at night and not get these difficult phone calls from the guests.
So I'd like to hear a little bit more of what that would look like. So I could imagine I am a homeowner, or maybe I have a rental property, and I say, well, these Airbnbs or short-term rentals, they're doing so well these days. Why don't I turn it into an Airbnb? I imagine you're signing a long-term contract because these things are usually nicely furnished. You're putting a lot of work into this, correct? So would you be taking, for example, an ordinary empty rental unit and transforming it into something very different? Or are you just more or less handling the property management and letting the owner take care of the furnishings and such?
Yeah, correct. We're managing it after the owner has set it up for the rental. So we're not going in and designing the short-term rental, setup. We're typically talking to owners after they have acquired and furnished the home and they've thought about renting it out. These are secondary homes. A lot of times it's an owner that uses it for their own purposes, but they want some additional income. Mm-hmm. And they rent it out to folks, during the summer peak times to make some money to offset their expenses for the home. Very few of these properties are probably homes where people are just buying them up for investment only purposes.
Love it. So it sounds like you're very flexible then. I've always had the dream that someday I'll just travel the world for half the year and let somebody manage my home as a short-term rental. We'll see how that goes. It just seems like, I think a lot of us in real estate, once you have that money that you can go and travel, your home is way too nice to be used as an ordinary rental property, it's never going to give you a decent return on income. Plus, I wouldn't be able to come back there 6 months a year. So
exactly,
anyway,
it is a struggle at times with these short-term renting situations where you really want to use the place on the 4th of July, right?
Yeah.
But you can get $6,000 for that week. So the owner is saying, oh, I'd love to stay there, but I can get $6,000 if I don't stay there with my family. So instead I'll rent it out. And it's a struggle to rent out your own personal home. And we try to make that as comfortable as possible for the owners and help them to understand the psychology maybe of renting out your home and having somebody else sleep in your bed for a couple of weeks and the money that you can make.
I love it. Yeah, I love that flexibility. Hopefully you're still doing this when I'm ready to retire because, I'm in Michigan and we have basements. So I just dream of locking that basement door and putting all of my personal belongings that I don't want touched down there and just going away for months. So
that's the way to go. You can make a lot of money off of short-term rental.
All right. Yeah. Look out for a call from the 248 area code.
Will do.
All right, let's go a little deeper into these short-term rentals. I mean, Airbnb has sort of become synonymous with these short-term rentals. People are nowadays referring to a phenomenon called the Airbnb bust. So real or fake, and what are you seeing that may be behind it?
People are getting skeptical of Airbnb. They've heard these little side horror stories about, experiences of renting a property and then you go there and it's not even available. It wasn't the one that you thought it was going to be. Also with, kind of damaging your property. So there's a lot of trepidation on Airbnb, but there's still a lot of opportunity there too. They are our biggest competitor, not Airbnb themselves, but the owners that think they can do it on their own, right? They'll list through Airbnb, they'll manage the tenants on their own. We actually will take the owner's property, we'll list it on our website, but we'll also list on Airbnb for them and manage that Airbnb process. So if we get a tenant through Airbnb, we take care of that. If we get a tenant through our site, we'll take care of that. I think the fees on Airbnb are extremely high. And that's probably the benefit that we have, is that if we have more of an automated process, we're we have hands on the ground that can manage your property for you, as where Airbnb, you have to kind of pay attention to that on a regular basis on your own.
Yeah, outstanding. And sounds like you concur with the most common theory that's been promoted, which is that the people who are failing right now are the ones who don't really know how to run it as a business.
Yes, absolutely. They hear that they can do it on Airbnb and their neighbor's making a lot of money off of it. They try to go out and do it themselves, but they don't know how to manage the guest properly. So they get bad experiences with the guest, bad reviews, and it's kind of a downward spiral for those owners.
Yeah. Any I love to ask property management stories, but I have a feeling that asking short-term rental property management stories is going to get me even more insane stories. Anything you can share with us about something weird that happened? Maybe not at one of your properties, but something you heard of.
Yeah, I'll talk about our property that we had in New Jersey that we rented out for 5 years. It was our secondary home. We used it for our own purposes. I got a call from a tenant that there was a bird in the house and they couldn't get it, and it was flying around all day long. It came down the chimney, I guess, found a way into the house, and it was a pretty sizable bird. Apparently they were chasing it around for a while trying to catch it. They couldn't catch it. I finally had to call like a animal removal service to go in and remove that pet. It was just something this is why I needed a property management company. I was 2 hours away. I'm not going to drive down there to get rid of this bird. So I had to find someone that could do it.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Yeah, short-term rentals, obviously there's a lot of glory and a lot of agony. So
there is.
I guess the bottom line here is don't try and do it yourself. You don't want to be one of the casualties. Don't fall by the wayside. Call Craig.
Exactly.
All right, good stuff. Well, maybe we can move back to the macroeconomic scene for a moment. I mean, I think we all kind of know what's going on. We sort of painted the picture, but what sort of strategies do you think are on the way in, and what sort of strategies are on the way out?
From an investment perspective?
Exactly. As an investor, like what sort of deals would you look for? What sort of deals would you accept? Again, there's all kinds of things. There's like the direct to seller, there's creative finance. There's just looking for the largest property that you can manage using economies of scale. What sort of things really make sense these days?
Yeah. First thing that comes to mind is that office space, right, is an area that I would be very hesitant to invest in at this stage. So even some of these mixed use properties that I'm seeing, office space on a few floors and residential on a few floors, you have to make sure that the numbers work, even if that office space is, partially vacant. So that's the first thing that comes to mind. I do like seller financing, right? Seller financing is a great way to be able to, if you can acquire a property, you can get a lower rate from that seller financing comparative to maybe what you might pay on a bank loan, and even put less money down as well. So that's something to kind of look out for in this environment with higher interest rates. And then, finally, don't chase after older deals. So I think as property prices are going up, there's a eagerness to find a deal that is maybe cheaper in a certain market. But if it's an older property, I have a rule of not investing in properties that are older than me now, because I have, and it's been an absolute disaster. My first home was built in 1901 that I bought, a 3-family building. And there have been issues every single year that I didn't fathom as I was building up the pro forma numbers. So just because a deal is cheaper comparative to the market and it's older doesn't mean it's a great transaction.
Love it. I think there's a lot that could probably be said about expense ratios, but I think you just said it.
Yes.
Not all buildings are created
expense ratios. When there's lead piping that's falling apart behind the walls, and you didn't really think that it would ever happen.
All right, let's see if there's anything else we haven't hit here. Like, what about communications? Do you have any great lessons with communications? I think you talked about just, getting out there, making sure people know your message, let them know you're investing, get out there every day. Any other communication insights you want to share?
There are so many opportunities at our fingertips right now with technology, and I'm just starting to tap into it. So I'm no expert on this, but you can set up, I think, having routine emails that I mentioned previously, even if you don't have transactions yet, just letting people that are interested follow your story, send out quarterly newsletters, monthly newsletters, whatever you can do. You can have free things that you offer, a white paper, 2-3 page white paper that you can have on your website where people can connect to it, automated emails that go to them to welcome them to your email listing, follow-ups with them, all automated where you don't even have to touch it once you set up these systems and processes. So use technology as your tool to be able to communicate with your network as much as possible, through social media and every other aspect.
All right, awesome. So at the end, I always like to do a lightning round. What do you say, Craig? You ready?
Let's do this.
All right. Tell us something about one of your markets that most people wouldn't know.
So everybody knows that there's a migration to the Southeast, right? So there's this large migration. That's primarily where I'm looking to invest these days, south of Virginia. And but what they might not think of is some of these secondary markets that are also booming. So I love finding a town that others haven't heard of. There's a few of them are like Asheville, North Carolina, Greenville, South Carolina, a place called Warner, Georgia, that we're investing in right now. Some of these secondary markets that companies are moving to because of the low cost. Acquisition prices for multifamilies are probably lower comparative to some of the larger city, metros, and great cash flow opportunities and valuation increase opportunities. So keep an eye open for those.
Yeah, I love those secondary and tertiary markets. They have lower prices, as you said. Another way to say that is to have higher cap rates, less likely to be blown out of the water if those cap rates expand, and they are. What would be some advice you would have for your younger self?
So my advice would be ready, fire, shoot. I spent a lot of time studying real estate, listening to podcasts, reading books, talking to people, probably way too long educating myself and not really going after transactions. And then there are some transactions where I moved a little too slowly on them because I was nervous for some reason that maybe in retrospect was not that big of a reason to lose the deal. And I look back on some of those deals and really kick myself for not acquiring them. So really just going after a transaction and with kind of full throttle, right? There are deals that don't make sense, and you can certainly make those decisions along the way, but if it looks great, go get it.
Yeah, I love it. So then next question is going to be about advice as well. real estate has a lot of good and bad advice floating around. So what would you say is the best real estate advice you've ever heard?
Best real estate advice?
Mm-hmm.
So the best real estate advice that I had received was to treat your real estate investing like a business, right? Don't treat it like a hobby. If especially I was in corporate America and had this side hustle that I was acquiring properties, I could just start buying them up and not really thinking about processes and systems that I was going to use in order to manage them. You can get yourself in a lot of trouble if you don't set up a good process in place to vet tenants, to bring them into your properties, to make sure that they're paying their rents, and a good process to manage your property's cash flows and financial situations as well, and take phone calls from tenants. So make sure that you really treat it with respect when you go into real estate investing. Don't just treat it like a hobby.
Love it. All right. What would you say is the worst real estate advice you've heard going around?
I got suckered into going to a $99 real estate training. And it was one of these no money down required to buy your first real estate property. And I figured I'd sit through it, spent the money, $99 to go to their training session. They immediately try to sell you on their larger transaction and, their larger training academy in the back. But they told the people in that audience, which I just felt so badly about. I didn't go to the second day because they told everybody to call their banks and increase your credit lines. Go around to lenders, family, friends, just start asking for money before you even have a transaction. Extend your credit so that you can buy your first property. I was just absolutely disgusted with their approach on that.
I'm disgusted too. Like you said earlier, you want to build that network to be ready to raise capital, but yeah, don't overextend yourself. Nuts, just nuts.
Exactly.
All right. So let's take a nod to the randomness of the universe. I've got my random question cards here. So just tell me when to stop cutting the deck.
Love it. All right, stop. It's a big pile of cards, George.
Big pile of cards. Okay. Love it. As usual, a completely random question. Which celebrity do people say you resemble?
Ooh. I wish that they thought I would resemble Justin Timberlake. I just admire that man very much. I'm going to go with him, even though if I grow out a little bit of a cool beard, I can look like Justin, perhaps. You're
awesome. Yeah, I think Justin Timberlake is amazing. Love all those dance moves. Yeah, I wish I had more of that good soul in my feet.
Exactly. That's right.
All right. Name a book that helped to forge you as a leader, as an entrepreneur, and why?
I'm going way back, and this is something that people would probably have to find in the antique aisle. It's a book called The Power of Optimism, and it's written by Alan McGinnis. I bought when I was first 16, 17 years old and read it, and then I just kept it and kept reading it. I've probably read it 10, 20 times. Everybody is optimistic that's probably listening to this podcast. They're optimistic about what they can accomplish, what they can do. But everyone, I would say, has a time when they feel less optimistic or a little bit down on who they are, what their goals are, and if they can achieve them. I pick up that book and I read it, and it kind of boosts me up a little bit and makes me think about the important things.
Yeah, I love it. Deep cut there. I just went looking for that on Audible. Not available. So I guess
you
pick up the print,
blow the dust off it. Yeah, there's used books available on Amazon.
How has a failure or misstep set you up for later success?
My biggest failure with real estate investing has been, I think I'm a very compassionate person. Some people say too nice, and I've been too sympathetic at times with my tenants. So tenants are sitting there, they give me a story as to why they can't pay their rents. And I hear their story out and I work with them, and, we kind of hug each other, and I tell them they can start paying me, as soon as they can. And it tends to get me in a trap. There are a few that really do make things happen, and they come back and they pay, but 80% of the time it doesn't happen. So don't fall into the trap of being sympathetic to somebody paying for your business, right? Paying your bills.
Love it. Quote to live by. Now, could you set us out with a quote to help forge our leaders and entrepreneurs in our audience?
I believe it's Julius Caesar. If you want to take the island, burn the boats. Just when you've set your mind on something and go after a goal, go after it full thrust with eagerness and an energy, and all your passion that you have, right? Don't leave anything behind. if you burn your boats and you really just dig into something and go after it, the opportunities are going to be endless.
Wow, I love it. And here, how about this? I'll match you quote for quote. I don't know if Julius Caesar actually said this, but through William Shakespeare, there is a tide in the affairs of men, which when taken at the flood leads to fortune.
I love it. That is another great one. I've never heard that one.
I love that one. Quotes to live by. All right. I want to thank you so much, Craig. And I just want to make sure, if you want to reach out to Craig, maybe you're one of those landlords who wants to go into the Airbnb and you don't want to be one of those washouts that didn't do it right. Or if maybe you've got a great deal and you think that Craig is the guy to bring on as your co-GP or whatever, how do we get out there and reach Craig Stevens?
Yeah, happy to meet with anyone and just chat with them about what they're working on and see if there's any way that I can assist them. You can reach me on LinkedIn most easily, Craig Stevens, and if you type in groundbreaking after that, you'll see my name, or info@groundbreakingre.com.
Outstanding, Craig. Thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and experience with our audience.
Thank you, George, for having me. I appreciate it. This was awesome.